Welcome, everyone. I'm Amy Seeley, president of Seeley Test Pros and LEAP, helping students to succeed in all kinds of tests from 8th grade to grad school throughout Ohio.
And I'm Mike Bergen, president of Chariot Learning, helping students with the test School and Life based out of Rochester, New York.
Between the two of us today, we have over 60 years of experience at the highest levels of the test preparation and supplemental education industries.
We both love to talk and learn about the latest issues in education, testing, and admissions. So let's get down to tests and the rest. The fascinating topic we want to explore today is how do female students benefit from female educators? But first, let's meet our special guest, Megan Fitzwater.
Megan Fitzwater is the founder of All Girls Prep, a woman-led tutoring company dedicated to empowering young women in test preparation in STEM. A graduate of an all-girls high school, she experienced firsthand the confidence and community that thrive in a female-focused environment. It was there that a dedicated physics teacher recognized her talent and encouraged her to pursue the subject, inspiring her to enter the University of Colorado Boulder as a declared astrophysics major. She transitioned from that supportive all-girls landscape into the male-dominated world of astrophysics, yet she grappled with imposter syndrome. Everything changed when she encountered her first and only female physics professor. Megan has dedicated her work to creating the kinds of academic environments where girls can reach their potential. She has developed innovative SAT and ACT curricula and built a team of accomplished female tutors. She is committed to ensuring that young women have not only the skills to succeed, but also the representation and mentorship to envision themselves in any field they choose. Welcome.
Thank you. It's so nice to be here.
Megan, it's so nice to have you here, not just to tackle a topic that we have not focused on yet and promises to be fascinating, but because you have a very interesting background, which we would love to hear about before we start talking about female students and female educators. We'll talk about you specifically. Tell us a bit about who you are, where you came from, and what you do.
Yeah, absolutely. So obviously you just heard my little intro, but originally from Cincinnati, Ohio.
Woohoo! See, Mike, another Buckeye.
There's a connection.
Exactly.
Another Buckeye who went to an all-girls high school as well. Yeah.
Oh, I can understand the connection here.
Exactly. I went to an all-girls school, and it was just such an incredible learning environment. And, transitioning to that landscape where I was one of just a couple of women in the field was really difficult at first. And, I really did struggle with this confidence and this like quiet feeling that I just didn't belong. And, when I had my very first and only female physics professor, I remember it was just so refreshing to see a woman up there taking up space and just being unapologetically herself. And there was something in that moment just that really shifted for me. She saw the cosmos and thought of the universe like in a similar way that I did. She was able to articulate it in a way that I hadn't figured out how to articulate it. And it just changed my progression. And I remember in college, people would always be like, what are you going to do with your astrophysics degree? Like, what does that even look like long term? And I always had the same answer. I was like, I'm gonna go get my PhD. I want to work for NASA. And then I want to create a STEM initiative for young women. And when, all girls prep kind of started to come to fruition, I realized that maybe my course, my path that I had envisioned for myself was happening a little bit out of order. And, this just felt a little bit more pressing and a little bit more important for me to pursue in this moment. And it has been really, really fulfilling to get to do it. So that's my quick little tidbit.
So how long has All Girls Prep been around?
So the conversation started about 1.5 years ago, and we came from our parent company, College Planning Partnerships, which has been around for over 2 decades in Connecticut. And yeah, so we really hit the ground running in the last 1.5 years. We're officially strategic partners with the International Coalition of Girls Schools. We have several partnerships with girls' schools across the country, and working on expanding our reach so that we can hopefully help more young women realize their potential in standardized exams and in STEM.
So let's kind of get into the topic then. I think, what are some of those key differences in how girls learn when they work with female mentors? Because that's obviously what we're talking about, is this idea that females may succeed differently or better if they have, sort of female educators working with them. So tell us more about that.
Yeah, absolutely. And one of the reasons that this pivot kind of came to fruition was, we had a couple of instances through our company where girls were paired with male educators, and we ended up getting some concerning remarks. So, parents called us, and in one instance, the tutor said to the girl, "You didn't learn that in class." In another instance, there was, an insensitive comment around pronouns. In another instance, the girl left feeling dumb. And coincidentally, we switched tutors. We always want to make sure that our students are paired with the best tutors, the best match. And those tutors happen to be women. And the shift was almost immediate. So these girls started to feel safer. They started to feel more confident. And, I started to dive deep into this. And there's so many studies that show that women do excel when they work with other women. 70% of women contribute their career success to having a female role model. And, there was a recent Stanford study in 2025 that showed that when girls were matched with female math teachers, they were more likely to have interest in STEM, and they were more likely to pass Algebra 1 and Algebra 2. And, I think that it really just comes down to creating a safe space for young women, to understand that it's okay to make mistakes, and to kind of model that vulnerability within yourself too. Like, hey, you know what? I mess up a lot, and that is part of the learning process. So those are some of the biggest key differences that I've noticed is, this kind of vulnerability aspect and feeling more comfortable to make the mistakes that are necessary to excel on these exams.
Do you think a lot of it is like just perception on the part of these sort of like young women kind of coming into their own in high school where like when you mentioned that about a tutor saying something that might have if a female tutor had said that, do you suppose like it would have landed differently? So it's sort of just there's a more feeling security when they're with other like women teachers than necessarily with male teachers.
I think that definitely has something to do with it. And I think, there's also so much to be said for seeing somebody who you see yourself in, and to just be able to make these mistakes. And, when one of the biggest issues that girls face on these exams is that we're more likely to tie our self-worth into a score, so if, we have this tendency to need to be perfect. And then when you get this score that tells you you're not, then it's like, oh my gosh, well, what's going on here? And so I think creating a space where these girls understand that you can guess on a problem, like you should guess on a problem is so, so important. So yeah,
It's been
absolutely.
interesting to me when I've done test prep classes at all girls schools. I've seen
Hmm.
that too. Even the questions they might ask that
Hmm.
I've actually said to other teachers, they would never have asked those questions
Hmm.
if there had been any boys sitting in the room, and so it's
Right.
an interesting thing to observe when you do see that. We definitely know that in the field of test prep, as we all three are,
Hmm.
we always hear, right, about students being bad test takers, right? Like I always say, if I had a nickel for every person who said, like, oh, my
Yeah.
student is a bad test taker, I'd be like, oh, I wouldn't be working anymore, right? But I'm wondering, like, specifically for girls,
Mhm.
what factors do you think contribute to them feeling like they specifically are bad test takers?
Yeah. It's funny because there's so many times where we get a phone call and, a mom or a caretaker will say, "Hey, my daughter has a 4.5 GPA, but she scored a 450 on the math." And that disconnect is largely attributed to the fact that there are, when you increase the number of multiple choice questions on an exam, that disproportionately affects girls. So girls are more likely to struggle with multiple choice questions. And that is what the SAT and the ACT are. So while you might be getting a 4.5 GPA, then when you're presented this exam that is almost completely a multiple choice format, it creates this like really higher cognitive load on girls who already tend to have lower self-efficacy. And, this disproportionately affects girls, especially on the math. So, I think the multiple choice format really, really does affect girls, and it often widens the gap in math. Girls are still underperforming boys when it comes to the math side of the exam. Um, so I think that the multiple choice has a lot to do with it. And the fact that, when you have this high GPA, but then you're scoring low, it's easy to say, like, well, you know what? Test taking just isn't my thing. I'm a bad test taker. So I think one of the biggest things here is reworking that and reframing that into a sense of, maybe you're not just a bad test taker, you have the tools to navigate this exam, right? And that means becoming more comfortable and confident with that multiple choice style of format.
Think I'd be remiss in not pointing out that this happens to boys as well. We hear from lots of boys who also have very high
Mhm.
GPAs and low test scores and feel that the test does not represent
Mhm.
their ability. And I think especially because traditionally, I don't have the statistics at my fingertips, but I'm pretty sure it's well established that girls do better in
Mhm.
school than boys. And so we get students who, even if the boys who, even if they do well in school, their test scores
Mhm.
might not show it, especially on the verbal sides. But I mean, again, there's like all these
Mhm.
different issues. It's so common that parents present their teens as not being good test takers, not recognizing the underlying
Mhm.
reasons why.
Absolutely. Yeah, and it does go both ways. Absolutely.
But I think we definitely can say that as far as girls go, there, and I would say there's probably more females out there that, let's say, that identify and saying, I'm not good at
Mhm.
math, right? Like, I'm not good in math. And so, of course, we know where that goes as they take a test. Well, then you almost become your own self-fulfilling
Mhm.
prophecy, because if the perception in your head is, I'm not good at it, and then this is a section of math, and then as you're saying, like, there's multiple choice, it kind of all probably snowballs. But I'm wondering too, this idea of like, do girls maybe internalize this insecurity, and then we see that more in how they might rate or feel about test
Mhm.
taking, right? That in a way that maybe boys have more, they either don't think about it, maybe they're more cavalier
Mhm.
about it, but girls certainly, I think, those brains, like, kind of like, wheels
Mhm.
spinning, making themselves think
I can
things.
give you a theory as to why boys might natively be better at standardized
Hmm.
tests. Two different reasons: sports and video games.
Yeah.
Competition, they're used to being in competitive
It's a high
spaces.
level of competition, constant
Mhm.
iteration, willing to miss a
Mhm.
shot to take two shots.
Hmm.
And I think that very often when we're working with students that don't have experience in those areas, we have to help them understand you've got to take more shots. You can't strive towards perfectionism. You can't be afraid to make a mistake to advance your cause. I won't stereotype genders and say, because we know lots of amazing
Mhm.
female athletes on the high school going to college level. And I know lots of girls that are into video games. But I think that those two activities definitely promote the mindset that you need for a high stakes exam, where it's not about trying to avoid making any mistakes. It's about trying to rack up as many
Mhm.
points as you can.
Definitely. And the exams, you guys know this first and foremost, they don't just test content. They test a mindset, and so that all those little pieces add into it. And I think recognizing and learning from the fact that, like, if I didn't mess up, if I didn't make mistakes over the course of my career, like, oh my God, I would be completely screwed. So learning how to reframe those mistakes as, like, hey, yes, this is part, like, yes, let's go, you made a mistake, that's awesome. It's
Which we all know in test prep, making mistakes in prep is really a good
hmm
thing, right? There's opportunities for growth and learning. So we need them to make
right,
mistakes in the prep
right.
part of the process,
If you
right?
aren't making mistakes, you aren't trying
You aren't
Exactly.
hard.
trying hard, right?
Exactly.
Exactly. Or you're certainly not stretching yourself as much as you might need
Yeah.
to.
Hmm.
Well, so given your background, obviously, in like the physics and astrophysics, I guess I'm wondering, what role do you see these tests like the SAT and ACT playing in shaping girls' opportunities to be able to pursue like the STEM fields?
Yeah. And STEM obviously is still, we're still underrepresented in the STEM fields. And We see these as one of like the first barriers to entry into STEM. If you want to go into a school as a declared engineering major, you have to have a good SAT math score. I know the ACT science just recently went optional, but at the same time, it's like if you want to go into school in a STEM field, you should be taking the ACT science, and they want to see high scores there. And so if, immediately right out the gate, you're not able to get the scores where you want them to be, then, that may shift your career focus. So they really are kind of like this early barrier. So I initially started doing, this whole thing, and everyone was like, well, why SAT, ACT? You're a STEM, you're focusing on STEM, but why SAT, ACT? And, this is just such a huge barrier to entry into those fields, because you do need to have those higher scores, especially if you're going to go in as a declared major. So helping girls navigate these exams early on not only helps them to go into those careers, but I mean, I'm sure you guys have noticed firsthand that this SAT, ACT prep, it really does translate to long-term success in college.
Absolutely. I mean, and that's especially when you think about the kind of skills that students need to bring to bear on these exams, which have to do with the the raw skills of self-didactic learning and accomplishment, the reading, the writing, the problem solving, the executive function, the time management, and the confidence to perform
Mhm.
at a high level.
Well, definitely, if you experience something hard and then you're motivated and you put in effort and you succeed, is only going to set you up to feel like, oh, the next time something's hard, I've experienced that before, so I'm either less afraid or I'm more determined to say, oh, I'll figure this out. And so I think that's sometimes why I think it's really helpful for students to experience success in their test prep, because it means not all things are not, not all things are
Mhm.
insurmountable. And I think it's an important lesson to learn that early
Mhm.
in your education or your profession for sure.
Absolutely.
So I've seen some of the research on student teacher congruence
Mhm.
in school, right? And so you're talking about the STEM fields, and it definitely can make a difference. I'll say for myself that I went to an all boys school,
Mhm.
but my physics teacher was a woman, and she was incredibly
Mhm.
smart and tough. She put me through my paces. Um, uh, so, but there is support for that. I'm not sure that there's as much support for the idea that gender can be tracked to make a
Mhm.
difference with tutoring,
Mhm.
but we'll include any resources we can find in the show notes. I'm curious about how you see as why is it that we all, myself included, if I have the option of assigning a woman or a man to work with a teen girl, I'll probably
Mhm.
choose the woman, like all things being equal. If they're of the same ability, same levels, same dynamics, right? Usually I think that boys respond better to male teachers. I don't know if it's actually true. I know my own caseload, I'm working with just as many girls as boys. But what do you find as the advantages in making congruence one of the features in matching students to teachers?
I think it comes down to and back to this idea of representation. And, all of our educators, I like to say they're as much mentors as they are educators. Like I have had multiple lessons where a girl will log on in tears because she had a rough day. And, I think that there is a certain level of being able to recognize the differences. So I think like when it comes down to a male tutor with a female student, there's certain differences that they will never understand, and being attuned to those and being in touch with those, just like I think inherently helps. And I think also showing the same vulnerability and the same being able to recognize and see somebody who has made mistakes and excelled through them and pushed through them makes such a huge difference. Um, and again, back to when girls are paired with female math tutors, and I'll send you guys these studies. There really are studies that show that it helps the self-efficacy. It helps this belief and this confidence in yourself. And I'm going to say confidence so many times. I'm so sorry if I am redundant.
Well, that's important, right? I mean, that confidence really is key to the ability
Mhm.
to perform your best under stress. And that idea that, right, test anxiety, as they call it, is in large part just due to your lack of confidence. You'll be able to score the way you want to.
Mhm.
At the end of the day, if a male tutor was matched with a female student, you know, while our goal with all girls prep is to for female tutors to normalize mistakes, to celebrate risks, and to help reframe these challenges, I think that male tutors, if they go into lessons with female students with that same type of care and creating a culture where those mistakes are valued, model vulnerability and persistence, I think that they can have, a wonderful effect on their students.
I will say this, one of the things in the community that we've created in the National Test Prep Association is I've been constantly amazed by how many of my fellow male tutors, colleagues, um, express like
Mhm,
amazing
mhm,
compassion and awareness for their female students,
mhm.
sometimes in ways that actually shames me as a female tutor. So I mean, I will say it is an interesting thing because there's certainly this conversation
Right.
isn't to say like male tutors are bad.
Mhm.
I'm constantly impressed by the professionalism in this particular area amongst a lot of tutors I see, these days.
But I bet, and I'm glad, Megan, that you brought the
Mhm.
conversation to the direction of like what kind of traits in a tutor
Hmm.
might make a female student perform better, feel more comfortable, trying harder. And I think we can all benefit from that because ideally as a professional
Right.
educator, you should be able to work with any student in front of you. You should be able to provide that skill set. And I think that a lot of
Mhm.
times boys need that as well. And if you have a tutor, a teacher, an educator, a coach, anybody on your
Mhm.
team that lacks the ability to support vulnerability or help cultivate resilience or help a person recognize that the mistake is just a step in the right direction and not something catastrophic. Well, that benefits everybody. And if the person can't do it, they either need to learn how to do it or maybe get out of helping people because they're not being that
Right.
helpful.
Absolutely. And I second all of that. Yes, if you're an educator, ideally you can work with every single student who sits in front of you. And I think that's, from the perspective of any test prep agency to make sure that you are fostering and having these conversations with your educators to make sure that they understand, like we have to be tuned into the needs of every single one of our students. And that looks different across so many different ways. So yeah, just completely agree with everything you said.
Let me ask one more question. What kind of student do you find works best
Mhm.
with a female educator or coach?
That's, I guess.
Well, we're thinking about it from the side of the teachers, right?
Hmm.
But ultimately,
Hmm.
right? Because some of us do really well
Hmm.
with students of the opposite gender,
Right.
and then sometimes not, right? And so, like, I think of the kind of students that I work with. I generally work with students who are trying to earn perfect scores, and I'm working with legitimately as
Hmm.
many young women as young men, and they're all doing amazingly, right? And they're all like growing and they're excited about it, but they
Hmm.
have certain mindsets. These are not kids that came wanting to be coddled or cultivated or worked through
Hmm.
certain deficiencies. They came ready to work in a way
Hmm.
that I'm well equipped to help them. But I couldn't work great with everyone. What kind of student needs that?
Yeah.
No, no, it's
Hmm.
an interesting question, right? How can we identify up front where the gender match is more important?
I think the first thing that comes to mind is a student who already lacks this belief in themselves. You know, we have a sticker that says she's not just my tutor, she's my hype woman. And that's because, we want to celebrate them and
Hmm.
celebrate the mistakes, the downfalls, all those different things. So I think if you have a student who already really struggles with that self-doubt, I think that matching with a female mentor, and I like using the word mentor almost more, because that really, it helped having that hype girl in the background helping you out and hyping you up.
Well, I think what you're identifying, even in tutoring, when we say we're so much like there's so much more to what we do with students, right? That to limit it by being like tutor, educator it's limiting language because it often is so much more than just the instructional piece of it, right?
Well, this is a fascinating conversation, Megan. I think that we've only begun to unpack it. Unfortunately, we are out of time. Thank you so much for joining us today.
Yeah, thank you guys so much. This was so nice chatting with you.
If listeners would like to get in touch with you, what's the best way for them to do that?
They can reach out to me. Email is probably the best. My email is megan@satprepct.com, and I will get back as soon as I can.
Awesome. We hope you enjoyed this discussion as much as we did. Be sure to join us for another fascinating topic and guest on the next Tests and the Rest.
Did you enjoy this episode as much as we did? Find expanded links and more for this and all of our episodes at our show page at testsandtherest.com. While you're there, be sure to explore everything the larger TestBright site has to offer, including real, expert, unbiased answers to the toughest admissions testing questions. Of course, we'd love for you to rate, review, and subscribe to Tests and the Rest on your favorite podcast platform. If there's a topic or guest you'd like us to feature, just let us know and spread the word.